Welcome to the Delmarva Almanac. Each week we connect you to the best of Delmarva. Like other almanacs, our aim is to tell you a little bit about our past, our present, and events in the near future. I'm your host, Dana Kester McCabe. During the 18th and 19th centuries, shipping was a major part of the American economy. Independence and the Industrial Revolution made people here more self-sufficient, but shipbuilding, trade, and sea transportation remained of critical importance. By the 1820s, hostilities with the British had ended and most of the pirates moved to the Caribbean. Shipping in our region would have become much safer if it were not for the dangers presented by the ocean herself and foul weather. Storms often pushed ships approaching the coastline into the shoals or beaches to be wrecked. Many lives were lost as a result, and public dismay led to the formation of the United States Lifesaving Service. Initially, Congress only authorized funds for some basic equipment for coastal communities in what they thought were key places. This only paid for dories to be used as rescue boats and occasionally buildings to store them in. These were to be used by local volunteers. It was not until after the Civil War that the government began paying for staff, developing better rescue equipment, and creating official life-saving stations. The first stations on Delmarva were built in 1875. Green Run and Assateague Beach life-saving stations were constructed on what is now the Maryland end of Assateague Island. That year also saw the installation of a station on Smith Island in the lower Chesapeake. The next year, Hogg and Cobb's Island stations were built in Virginia. In Delaware, the Cape Henlopen station was the first to be commissioned in 1876, followed that same year by Indian River Station. Since its primary concern was protecting commerce, the U.S. Life-Saving Service was made an agency within the Treasury Department in 1878. By the turn of the 20th century, 19 stations were installed on Delmarva's coast, and more than a dozen lighthouses were built there and along the Chesapeake and Delaware Bays to help prevent shipwrecks. The managers of these were called keepers, and their crew were called surfmen. Though things were made a little safer, storms were still mostly unpredictable at that point. Rescues were high-risk affairs. Early in the morning of January 10, 1883, a schooner called the Sally W.K. foundered off the coast of Ocean City during a blizzard. The ship had a crew of 7 and was carrying a cargo of coal from Baltimore to Boston when they faced whiteout conditions, causing them to run aground. The desperate crew climbed into the rigging. One man, a German sailor named Anton, said he could see the shoreline and decided to swim ashore to go for help. By 11 a.m., the storm began to abate long enough for a surfman on lookout duty to see the Sally K and raise the alarm. They used a cannon to shoot a rescue line to the ship. The grateful sailors tied the rope to the mast, and a breeches buoy was sent along it to convey the almost exhausted crew back to shore. Once there, they had to be carried by the surfmen and Ocean City volunteers through the snow to the life-saving station, where they were given dry clothes and warm food and drink. 16 miles south, poor Anton washed ashore, having perished. This is just one of many dramatic rescue stories. Sometimes the crews of ships in trouble were their own worst enemies. In December of 1882, the Madalena Secondo was stranded at Cedar Island, Virginia. The boat's drunken crew had to be forced ashore by the local life-saving station keeper and his crew. During the 40 years that the U.S. Life-Saving Station existed, Delmarva's stations responded to almost 200 major wrecks along our coast. Often more than one station would respond, much the way our fire departments help each other today. Cape Henlopen saw the most action with 28 major wrecks. By far, more ships got in trouble on the southern end of the peninsula. Hogg and Cobb Islands on Virginia's Atlantic side and Smith Island on the Chesapeake each handled 24. This may have been because the many islands clustered around the tip of Delmarva are merely shifting sands. Navigation charts tend to become useless almost as soon as they're printed, making the waters there very difficult to negotiate. During the 20th century, charts, ships, communication, and weather forecasting all began to steadily improve. Sadly, the U.S. Life-Saving Service quickly became obsolete and underfunded. Its position in the Treasury Department became a bit of a political hot potato. Station keepers and their crews were not provided pensions, so recruiting their replacements as they age simply was not possible. New equipment and maintenance were not provided. Because many of the stations were in vulnerable locales, they fell into disrepair and were prey to damaging storms. Finally, in 1915, Congress created a new branch of the military called the U.S. Coast Guard to not only defend our coastline, but provide naval rescue services. Here on Delmarva, 2 of those original life-saving stations are now museums. The Indian River Station is now part of the Delaware Park System. The Ocean City Life-Saving Station was first built on Caroline Street. Decades after it was decommissioned, a group of local history lovers raised the money to save it. In 1977, it was moved to its present location overlooking the inlet. It has an amazing collection of historical artifacts and original source material about the surfmen and the life-saving service compiled by Suzanne and George Hurley. Visit this story on our website, delmarvaalmanac.com/history, for links to them and other references for this topic. Well, that's all for this edition of the Delmarva Almanac. We'd like to thank our community partners, the Friends of Delmarva Public Radio, the Community Foundation of the Eastern Shore, and underwriters, eatdrinkbuyart.com, for their help in bringing this program to you, our audience. Our theme music was provided by Brightside Studio. This show has been a Moonshell production. Thanks for listening. Until we meet again, may the rhythms and tides of Delmarva bring you good fortune.